Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our webinar, SEL on Your Shelf, using books to build SEL skills. I am joined by the wonderful Dr. Adiaha Spinks-Franklin and Kelly Baptist. I'm going to be moderating the conversation today, and I'm thrilled that you're going to get to hear from these two fabulous people. And so this webinar is being recorded. The link to view the webinar and also the toolkit and the resources that we're going to share during this presentation will all be shared with you within the week. So in the meantime, though, after the webinar concludes, you can reach out to me if you need a certificate to show to your administration. Okay, so to talk about what we're going to be discussing today, we'll all briefly introduce ourselves and then really get into the content. So first, we're going to be hearing from Kelly, the award-winning author of The Electric Slide and Kai. And she is also an SEL interventionist. So it's the most amazing parts of two worlds. And she is going to be talking about using SEL and children's literature in the work that she does as an SEL interventionist in her district, as well as some of the elements that she incorporated in the Electric Slide and Kai that address SEL components. And then Dr. Adiaha Spinks-Franklin will really dig into the biology behind SEL. And I have learned so much from just the brief meetings with her about how biology is critical to all this SEL work that we're doing in the classroom. If we don't understand the biology, we're not going to be able to do the work effectively. So I'm really excited for you all to hear from Adiaha. And then I'll be talking about the toolkit for building an SEL library. It's one of our newest resources that we have to offer at Lee and Low. And then we'll conclude with some question and answer. So to start us off, as some of you may have seen me before on previous webinars, I am Katie Potter. I'm the Senior Literacy Manager at Lee and Low Books. I develop the teacher's guides and the educator resources that you see from Lee and Low. And I also work with nonprofit universities. I work with doctors like Adiaha on incorporating our diverse books into their respective programs. And I also am a former teacher, educational researcher, and I have my master's in literacy in children's education. And Adiaha.
Hi, my name is Adiaha Spinks-Franklin. I am coming to you from the land of the 39 tribes, the unceded territory of Oklahoma City. This is formerly the Indian Territory, and I'm seventh generation descendant of enslaved Africans and indigenous people in Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, and Alabama. I am a board certified developmental and behavioral pediatrician, and I work with children who have developmental disabilities and behavior disorders, and I study the effects of trauma on child development and behavior. And I'm really happy to be here today.
Thanks so much, Adiaha. And I have loved working with Adiaha over the years. She has given me such insight. And we just are absolutely thrilled to have her finally. So thank you, Adiaha. Okay, Kelly.
Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Baptist, and I come to you from Michigan, Southwest Michigan. So, I got to do this. I'm right about here. Got to do the mitt. So I'm in Southwest Michigan. I am an author. I am a mom to 5 children, and I serve as a social emotional learning interventionist at a middle school. So juggling all of that, but all of my roles I feel are very intertwined. So very happy to be with you today for this very important discussion. And hand clap, applause to all of you who are working with children. If we have teachers, librarians, parents here viewing this webinar, it's a tough job. So hats off to you, those who have gone back to school and those who are cherishing the last few days here of summer. I'm glad that you have joined us.
Absolutely. And so Kelly is going to start us off with talking about Electric Slide and Kai.
Absolutely. So this is my first picture book inspired by one of my daughters. While we were at a wedding reception, she was trying to do a dance. She was actually trying to copy a dance that they were doing on the dance floor, AKAs, Alpha, Kappa, Alpha. Sorority Incorporated. And I just remember looking at her off to the side, trying to copy everything, doing the mirror, doing all of this stuff. And I thought it was very cute how persistent she was in trying to follow their stroll. And that is what inspired this story. So in the story, Kai is a young boy who is from a family of dancers, and he seems to be the only one who cannot get his steps right. We have the ticking clock of a wedding coming up, and he is trying to learn the electric slide before that wedding. So definitely themes of resilience, perseverance, and also the feeling of I'm the oddball out. Everybody else in my family can do something, but I can't. So that's kind of the basis or a quick little background of the story.
It really touches on all themes SEL related. So we have a book trailer for this book. Some of our books have book trailers, and they're awesome ways to get kids hooked into a book before you read, and then kids can also make their own book trailers. We have some activities in the free teacher's guide about book trailers, but I wanted to share it with you because it's so fun. Okay. All right, Kelly. So we'd love to hear how you fuse, like you said, how you fuse SEL in your work and also incorporating literacy and books into those SEL themes.
Absolutely. Before I jump into that, I just have to give it up for my illustrator, Darnell Johnson, who really brought the story to light. Don't want to underestimate that. He's an amazing person and did a really good job with the pictures here. I think what I found in my work as an SEL interventionist is just the strength and the beauty of being proactive. And I will admit, with this role in my particular district, as much as the intention is to be proactive, a lot of the work is still reactive. Something has happened and now we have to deal with it and in a sense, backtrack and look at the origins of the behavior and why the situation happened. As much as possible, though, the goal is to be proactive, to get ahead of the behaviors. So as we're looking at a new school year, we can look back and kind of see some of the trends and the things that we dealt with last school year and see what we can do to get ahead of those behaviors. What can we do differently? What text, what titles might address some of those issues that we had so that from day one, jump into it from the beginning of kind of highlighting those skills and those improvements that you would like to see in your classrooms or your areas, even in your home. That's what I've learned as well. The things that I'm doing at school can also be applied at home with my own children. So that's been something that's been huge to me. Fortunately, with SEL, we're often always doing it and we just don't realize it. So it's not something like you have to go out, oh, I need to get training on SEL. Yes, it's good to know the basics and the foundation of it, but a lot of times you have to give yourself credit. You're doing it anyway throughout your classroom. And I think the opportunity here is just to be more intentional with the things that you're already doing. The natural uses of SEL and how it can, even in your math class, your social studies class, it really should be embedded in every part of the school experience. I think grace is important. I put that bullet point there because even after all the training you might do and all the coaching and teaching you might do with your students, there will be mistakes. There will be setbacks. There will be mistakes made just like us as adults. We make them all the time. And so I think children are able to rest easy knowing that there will be grace extended, even if a consequence also has to be extended. There can be grace in that consequence. And then once students have these tools, they can begin applying them in their everyday life, in their home lives, and they can come back and share those things. And those are celebration moments. If a student come back and say, hey, I used this breathing technique and it helped me. My little brother turned off my game when I was still in the middle of it. Little victories like that, I think, should be celebrated in the classroom. Okay, and then using SEL books on your shelf. I think a lot of times after a workshop or a webinar, seminars such as this, the tendency is to go out and say, well, I need to find some new books to add to my shelf that deal with SEL. And that is great. I'm all for adding relevant titles, but I would also advise you to look at the titles that you have and see what SEL themes you can glean from what you already have on your shelf. In most cases, they are there already. And I say that from the author standpoint as well, because I was not thinking about this when I wrote the story. I wasn't thinking, let me put some character traits in here and let me try to teach this lesson here. I think because I'm writing from a place of what I see, what I experience, what is natural and universal themes, it just kind of came out on its own. And so then our job as adults, as leaders, as educators, we can look at titles and pull a theme from what you already have. So that would be my step one, to look at what is on your shelf and to try to glean what you can from that title, from what's there already. Some suggestions. I've touched on universal themes already. That is a good place to start. With Kai, he has to learn something new. That's a universal theme that all kids have to go through, whether it's tying your shoe, learning how to ride a bike, learning how to share, wait your turn in line. There are certain things that are just universal. And I think when we capitalize on those, you'll be able to find something in any title. Then I also think giving kids ownership over what you're reading is also very valuable. So in your classroom, you might say, hey, this week we're going to go with David's pick and really use this title. Next week, we're going to go with Kendra's pick. And it gives the student kind of an ownership. We're reading my book. We're reading the book that I picked. And then even the communication with home so that parents know what are we reading and what are the themes that we're really studying so that on their end, they can reinforce them in the home as well. Not to get off topic, but I think we all realize that education is a lot different than it used to be. And a lot of social emotional learning themes that in days past, kids learn those things or were taught those things in the home environment, in a faith-based environment or a community-based environment, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Pathfinder, something like that. It was almost a given that they were learning these things and already had the knowledge when they came into the school environment. Today, that is not always the case. And it is almost an expectation now of the school to teach these things. That's a whole nother webinar where we could discuss, is that right or wrong? The reality is that's the reality. The school is leaned on a lot more now as those other entities have changed in the years since we were younger. And so we have to adapt to that. And we can debate and talk about, we have our stance on that. The reality is that's what it is. What can we do to still service the children that come into our classrooms or who come into our library? Because it's just a different game. So we are the ones who have to present those. In this spread of Kai, I really like it. It kind of gives a background on why he's reluctant to dance, number one, and why he also wants to prove himself. Because this happened at a family reunion. He knocked somebody over trying to dance. And so he now has that that challenge or that roadblock in his mind. This could happen again. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to mess up. Everyone has felt that before. And that's a great thing to build on, to ask your students at this page turn, how do you think Kai feels right now? What do you think how would you feel if this happened to you? What would you be feeling? How could you get through it? And I think these questions they go hand in hand with SEL, self-awareness, being in tune with how you feel about a certain situation. Feelings affect behavior. And actually, we'll start with thoughts. Thoughts affect feelings, feelings affect behavior. And so if we're able to get a handle on our thoughts, then we're able to better handle how we feel. And these questions help kids to do just that, to take a minute, dig deeper beyond the behavior that has happened, and to really hone in on, well, what was I feeling? And then before that, what was I thinking? So this is just an example in the story of where you could do that, where you could stop and have that conversation with students. And then me personally, I used this title, Chess Rumble by G. Neri, in one of my classrooms. I started this role in the 2019-2020 school year. So we know how that started, how that school year started and how it ended. And right before the pandemic, I had started doing whole class sessions. But previous to that, it was more small group. And there were a lot of issues coming out of this particular classroom. So this is a title that I chose to read with them. And I kind of knew the impact it was going to have before I started. But it was just as amazing as I thought when it happened. And so just to summarize, we got to the scene in the story where there's a fight and there's a picture that kind of makes the fight visual. It's a novel in verse. When I got to this point, I had everyone's attention instantly because they knew there had been fights in the cafeteria. They know how things build and how you gear yourself up and how you have to kind of not let yourself look weak. And so when I got to this and I showed them the picture, everybody was instantly engaged. And I didn't even finish the chapter all the way. I was able to stop at this point and ask questions. What's going on? How did this happen? What do you think triggered this one to make this move? What would have happened if he said something different? What would have happened if he had done something different? And they were able to share because they had seen this happen before. And they were able to share because it gave them space to put themselves in the moment and to really think when there was not a fight going on. That goes back to the proactive. You can't ask these questions in the middle of a fight. What are you thinking? What are you doing? You know, what else could you say instead of hitting him right now? That's not the time. It's not going to work out. And so this is an excellent way to be proactive, especially if you know these things are happening in your classroom or it's happened before, students are exposed to this. And I found great success using this book because it was a natural springboard to the question and to the discussion. We spent the rest of the time just kind of discussing fights, the anatomy, if you will, of a fight, how it stops, where can we break the chain reaction. And so this is another kind of example of how you can use what's on your shelf or how you can pinpoint what you need from a book that will meet the needs of your classroom. And that goes to the last point. Look for topics that are relevant to your class. So if it's sharing, if it's selfishness, if it's talking out of turn, you can kind of find titles that will address those things.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So many important and valuable tips and strategies. I also think that, like you said, picking topics and books that are relevant to what's happening in your classroom, like this wonderful example of Chess Rumble, and it also takes the onus off of us teachers and parents that we're showcasing characters going through something and we're asking them questions. We're not telling them what to do. We're having a conversation about it where they can come to realize the teaching point on their own. And that's the wonder of books, with using books in SEL. So thank you so much, Kelly. And now we are going to segue into Dr. Adiaha's talk about the biology behind SEL and what Kelly had explained to us about what goes on in the classroom. Dr. Adiaha is really going to break down why those things happen and how best to inform our educational pedagogical practices through the biology behind SEL. So take it away, Dr. Adiaha.
Thank you, Katie. We use many regions of our brain when we are developing social emotional learning, and it really starts at birth. The three main areas that are highlighted in this slide are the frontal lobe, which is behind your forehead, and that is responsible for thinking, for judgment, for problem solving, and decision making. The emotional part of the brain that is responsible for our safety is called the amygdala. It's this little bitty walnut right in the middle of the brain. And the amygdala can also be referred to as your inner cave person, your inner cave man, inner cave woman. In fact, I've given mine a name. Her name is Peaches. And so when you trigger me and I go off, that's not me, that's Peaches. You should have never woke her up. I had her sleep when I came to work today. Now, on the side of the brain, this little like a horseshoe shaped is the hippocampus. That's where our learning and memory take place. As babies are born and they're growing up, these regions of the brain are all developing. And through the frontal lobe, you really learn how to judge a social situation, look at facial expressions, look at people's overall demeanors and figure out, okay, is that a friend or a foe, right? And if that person is considered to be a friend, then other regions of the frontal lobe kick in. They give a lot of empathy. You express a lot of empathy and compassion and feel like that person's a member of your tribe. However, if you see somebody that is considered a foe, not a member of your tribe, then a different part of the frontal lobe kicks in, and that triggers your amygdala or your inner cave person. And that says, oh my goodness, what am I going to do to keep myself safe? Do I fight? Do I fly? Or do I freeze? Whenever that inner cave person is triggered, it actually shuts down your ability to learn and your ability to think and problem solve. And what Kelly talked about with the fights at the school, interrupting a fight is not based on logic. It just has to be physically separating people because the logical parts of the brain shut down. Next slide. If we were to examine development, so I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician, and of course, initially I had like 5 detailed slides on milestones. I was like, oh, this is not a pediatric conference. This is a webinar for school teachers. Let me back up and do the main topics. Let's talk about infancy. The big part of infancy from birth until you're 12 months old is attachment. Attachment really isn't about your feelings. Attachment is who do you trust to keep you safe and secure? So that baby attaches to the adults in their environment. And when that newborn comes out, that kid already knows the mother's smell, the sound of the mother's voice. And that newborn's visual acuity, the distance they can see, is from breast to face. So that kid breastfeeds can see the mother's face very clearly. The rest of the world is all blurry. Doesn't matter because that's their primary attachment figure. Also, babies are born with something called temperament. Temperament is your inborn style of interacting with the world. And temperamental research is really fun, it's really sophisticated, and there are lots of different components of temperament. But you know how some kids are just kind of shy and slow to warm up, and some kids like just raw, go for it, and some kids, you know, kind of weigh consequences, and some kids are easygoing. Those are temperaments. You can't do anything about a temperament. That's just how your kid is molded by Mother Nature. Babies also in that first year of life begin to show emotions. Not only are they showing emotions, but they also learn how to read emotions. Like a 2-month-old learns how to mimic some of your facial expressions. Like they'll try to purse their lips when you purse your lips, or raise their eyebrows when you raise your eyebrows. By 9 months of age, an infant understands inhibitory voices. Like when you say no, it doesn't matter what language you say no in. It could be that it could be niet, it could be nine, it doesn't matter. The kid knows that that tone of voice means I better stop what I'm doing, right? So that's understanding the connection between the sound of the voice and the meaning of the words coming out. And at that 9-month age, they also begin to know how to match your facial expressions and voice together. And by the end of the first year, the kid is developing something that's very important called joint attention. Joint attention is the ability to share an experience with another person. So that's when children can point to something with their index finger that they want, and then they learn to point to something of interest like an airplane or a fire truck passing by. Now, once you get into toddlerhood, between the ages of 2 and 4, then you see this great personality really coming out. So temperament plus lived experiences equals personality. What that means is, as a parent and as a teacher, we're actually helping our children form their personalities by their lived experiences. The temperament we can't do jack about, but you can certainly help shape a personality. And in this time, during these early years of toddlerhood, 2, 3, years old, these children are actually learning now how to label emotions in themselves and others. And they're also can learn how to mask them. So by 2 years old, kids learn kind of how to not show all of their emotions. And then when they overwhelm, they just fall out and have a temper tantrum right there in Target, because that's just what they do. Socially, they're learning pretend play and make-believe play. And they're developing this beautiful thing called magical thinking, which is one of my favorite childhood things. And it is where you confuse fantasy and reality. So during the toddler years, children are like, yeah, there's a monster in my closet. I saw it. because they really believe in that monster, and they really believe in the tooth fairy, and they really believe in Santa Claus. The other thing is recognizing another person's perspective. That's called theory of mind. And when you ask in the story, what was Kai thinking at this point? You're asking your students to exercise theory of mind. That means you're going to use the frontal part of their brain to connect with Ty as if he's a member of their tribe, so that they can express empathy and figure out what he's thinking and feeling, even though they may not have experienced that. And in childhood, kids begin to learn to point to pictures that you name, and even parts of pictures, like point to the nose of the dog. So now in literature, they're recognizing that books and words have meanings, that the words we say can also be in letters, and those letters are words, and those words have meanings, and those words can also be the names of feelings. Early childhood is about first through third grade, right? This is where kids get into more abstract emotions, and they begin to really see their complex emotions like frustration, confusion, disappointment in themselves and others. Now, that's if somebody has taught them. If they raised by cage people, then all they're gonna know is happy, sad, mad. I'm gonna ask you to not allow your 8, 9, 10-year-old to only describe happy, sad, and mad. Children should be able to describe other complex emotions that all human beings experience. And by early childhood, kids have incredible play with their friends. They've got their first, their first best friend. And they are really learning how to play rules. I remember watching my kids in the backyard negotiating the rules of kickball. And they would spend like 30 minutes discussing the freaking rules of kickball and like 10 minutes playing kickball. It was ridiculous. But that was a big part. But they also learned how to manipulate rules, how to lie, and how to manipulate people. That's all a part of that early childhood phase. So that's when we start teaching them about honesty. Another thing that's developing is that they're able to retell the plot of a story, or they're able to relate a story to their lived experiences. So they really start learning from books when they're between like 5 and 8 years old. Now, middle childhood is really important too. Okay, life is just important. I don't care how old you are, every age matters. So middle childhood is like the 9 to 12-year-olds. And those kids now are beginning to see themselves within the context of their larger communities. And this is where their identity comes in, right? So they really start getting into their racial identity development, their gender identity development, their disability identity, and other identities. Like if they're part of a religious organization, they understand their identity as a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or a Hindu. They really are a Buddhist, like that, or agnostic or atheist, whatever it is. I don't want to leave nobody out. In the middle childhood age, kids are really building those identities based on their families and their communities, and they're building their worldview. And they understand not only the rules of a game, like how we're going to play Mother May I in early childhood. Now we're understanding societal rules. And I'm understanding that based on my racial category, with the rules in society, I actually have to respond this way emotionally. And I got to be calm when my teacher accuses me of doing something that isn't fair, because at this time, fairness is like everything. And I'm going to question when something isn't fair. And they also begin to read for their interests. Now, by this age, if a child has a learning disability and reading is difficult for them because they have their learning disability is reading, these children might be reluctant readers. But if you give them literature that is of interest to them, it piques their interest, like graphic novels or comic books or something that's within their realm of interest and has less text complexity for them, then you might see them reading in their interest. And finally, in adolescence, as we know, this is where our friendships evolve into romantic relationships, and we are exploring our sexuality at this age. And we are solidifying all of our identities, whether they're racial, gender, religious, occupational, athletic, etc. And we start challenging societal norms. So I might have had to wear frilly, lacy socks in kindergarten for my school pictures, but I'm going to wear a black suit with like black eyeliner and a black tie, for my school pictures. In fact, I might just boycott school pictures altogether, because that is just a patriarchal route. So, that's what adolescents do. They also start reading for information because they're thinking about their life in future tense, and they're more independent from their parents. So this is where you start seeing them learning how to drive, how to work, how to be more independent, wanting to express themselves separate and apart from their families. I don't care how old your child is, you're still their number one consultant. Don't forget that. Parents are still the number one consultant. I don't care how grown they think they are. So that's the basics of child development. You can get more from the CDC website. Now, what can derail it? Trauma and adversity that is just not ending. When we look at the mental health of children, those regions of the brain that we talked about, the social emotional learning, are also affected by childhood trauma. And y'all, at least 2/3 of children in the United States and 2/3 of adults in the United States have had some form of trauma in their lives, like significant traumatic event. And because of the pandemic, the numbers of people who've experienced trauma have really gone through the roof, excuse me, please. Now, what trauma does is it can cause different kinds of stress. And not all stress is bad stress. Y'all know that, right? So positive stress is a temporary experience that is not traumatic, that temporarily raises your stress hormones and they go back to normal. This would be like trying to make it to a meeting on time, first day of school, going to a dental appointment. That would be considered positive stress. And your stress hormones completely go back to normal once the event is over or the event gets started. Tolerable stress is where you've actually had adversity in your life. There was something traumatic, there was something bad that happened, but your family is there to buffer you, your community, your tribe, your village. They're all there to buffer you through it. So your stress hormones go up for a while, but they eventually go back to normal because you have the support that you need. So a child can actually have the death of a sibling or a death of a parent, but when their village gives them all of the support and resources and tools they need, they can actually learn to live a very healthy life in spite of that adversity. But what if you've had one thing after another, after another, after another, and the adults in your life are not able to buffer you from the effect of that trauma because they too are traumatized? This is called toxic stress. This is where your stress hormone levels go up and stay up in your body for a prolonged period of time because your inner cave person is working overtime. They've done studies to show that the inner cave person, the amygdala, actually grows larger in situations where children are under toxic levels of stress for prolonged periods of time without the buffer of their family members or a caregiver. And you know what shrinks? The frontal part of the brain actually loses brain cells, their ability to think and problem solve and make decisions. And the side of the brain where the learning and the memory come from shrink. They lose nerve endings. So what ends up happening is if a child is living under these circumstances where they are homeless or are partially homeless, there's domestic violence, there's untreated mental illness in the family, such as a household member who uses or abuses substances. If there's neighborhood violence, you just start naming these things. Every single day this child is experiencing this, then their whole stress hormone system gets reprogrammed and ends up at a higher level. So it doesn't take much to stress you. It doesn't take much to trigger you. Any little thing that makes your brain think that you are unsafe is going to trigger your amygdala. Next slide. So then what you're going to end up having is, so this is the damage that happens to the brain over time, right? We talked about your amygdala gets bigger, and instead of it simply looking to see if the saber-tooth tiger is coming, because that's what it was designed for, right? For our caveman ancestors. So is the saber-tooth tiger coming? Okay, not. Well, if you're under a lot of stress for a long period of time, everywhere you look, you see a saber-tooth tiger. And your amygdala doesn't go to sleep. It stays awake because it is constantly surveying for danger. That means it interferes with the frontal lobe's ability to think, to problem solve, to make decisions. It interferes with the hippocampus's ability to learn, to recall what it has learned. You're not going to do well on that math test because this part of your brain is surveying for danger. Next slide. So once that amygdala is triggered, these are our main reactions. We're ready to fight. This is this kid who turns over the desk. They want to beat up somebody. They start screaming and yelling, cussing folk out, or they want to fly. These are the kids that just get up, leave the classroom. They ain't gonna say nothing to you. They just have to escape the situation because they've been triggered. And then you've got the freezers, the children who just shut down. They put their hoodies over their heads. They put their heads on their desk. They hide under the desk. Those are the freezers. These children are telling you something through their stress responses. Not only do thoughts lead to feelings and feelings lead to behavior, like Kelly said, but behavior is a form of communication. It always has meaning. So if that student is leaving your classroom and you know that they have been triggered, don't stand in the doorway and block them. The best thing you can have for those students that you know experience a lot of adversity, they have no control over, and their families are struggling to protect them, is to have a safety plan for those children. Baby, when you feel yourself getting worked up, go and talk to Mr. So-and-so in the gym. If that's your favorite person is the coach, then you go talk to Mr. So-and-so, you are excused. Does that make sense? Okay, next slide. So these are some of the basic evidence-based self-calming techniques. Box breathing is really easy to teach little kids, right? So you think about the preschool age children, early childhood kids. Box breathing is where you use a count of 4 or a count of 5, depending on the technique, to inhale, hold your breath, exhale, and hold your breath. So each one of those is a count of 4 seconds, and you do it 4 times. 4-7-8 breathing is an ancient breathing technique through yoga that's been around for thousands of years. And what they found about this technique is that holding your breath for inhaling for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7 seconds, and slowly exhaling for 8 seconds, that slow exhale really helps to calm down the brain. The reason slow breathing techniques work is this. In the brainstem, the bottom part of the brain, we have the mechanisms that control our heart rate and our respiratory rate, right? It's in the brainstem, it's automatic, and it sends out signals to the rest of the brain and the body. But when you slowly breathe, holding your breath, slowly breathing out, you trick the brainstem into thinking that everything is cool. So the brainstem says, hey, heart, slow down. Hey, sympathetic nervous system, calm down, y'all. We good. Ain't no saber-tooth tiger. We at a picnic. All is chilling. That's how deep breathing techniques work. They actually physiologically reverse the stress response. And this is something that is easy for children to learn, can be practiced, can be used anytime without anybody knowing. Now, another thing is to help kids develop their emotional intelligence. A part of that is being able to recognize their own emotions when they're happening. So some people, depending on the therapist you work with, may, for younger children, use the red light, yellow light, green light, right? Green light, I'm calm, I'm chilling. Yellow light, I'm starting to get upset. Red light, I am ticked off. Peaches is awake, right? The inner cave person is up and I'm ready to fight or run away from you or shut down. So we tell the younger students, like first grade, second grade, third grade, when you're on yellow, it's time to start doing your breathing. It's time to start doing your visualizations to help you calm down so you don't get on red. Because once you're on red, all bets are off. You can't talk to a person on red because you're talking to their inner cave person. Their older students can do a scale of 1 to 10. And what I found among my patients that once you get on 7 is the last number on the scale where you can actually reverse the effect of the trigger. Because once they're on 8, it's over with. They need to go see Mr. So-and-so and calm down, seriously. So with those, once they notice themselves getting to be a 5, some kids, they're triggered so easily. If they get on 5, their goal is to stay between a 3 and a 4. And if they get on 5 or 6 with their emotional scale internally, they start using their breathing techniques, okay? Next slide. And these are some resources where you can go and find evidence-based breathing techniques for children.
Wow. Thank you so much, Adia. Actually, before we move on, when you're in the red, and before our official Q&A, when you're in the red zone, do you have, in the past, have you established with patients like a safe, when you're in the red zone, do you have a plan for every one of your patients? Because the breathing techniques will be void?
Absolutely. That's a good question. That's a part of the safety plan. For children who have a lot of adversity in their lives, they really need a safety plan. Just like a person who deals with domestic violence, they need to also have a safety plan. So if they're at home, what hand signal do the parents use to indicate it's time to take a time out and stop arguing? If you're at school, what hand signal, what safety word can you say that's going to alert the adults that you need a break? And then where can you take that break? So you can use your techniques to calm down, because when you're surrounded by a classroom of 30 kids, they might continue to trigger you, all the noise and all the sensory input from the environment. So there might be a calm down room, a quiet area, not a cell, a calm down lounge-like rule. Too many of our schools have turned into junior jails that only increases children's trauma. So a nice little lounge-like calm down area where children can go, work through their frustrations, or they have a teacher or an adult that they trust they can check in with. But that red, it's time to let them go, honestly, and not in a punishment way, but in a way to keep them safe and keep others safe where they can calm themselves down.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. So before we go into our Q&A session, I wanted to share with you all our new toolkit for building a diverse SEL library. So what Kelly was mentioning before about using books on your shelf, we also wanted to encourage you all to think about that. And how Kelly mentioned, you don't have to go out and buy a new library. You can repurpose many of the texts that you already have just sitting on your shelf, but thinking about them with an SEL lens. And what makes beautiful stories so engaging is their storylines, the wonderful character development. We want the stories to be engaging for kids, not didactic like sometimes what you typically see when it's teaching a specific point. So really using the beloved children's books in your library to make the best use of SEL. So we provided a list of all of these themes. All of our resources are free and available online. And we'll put all of the links in the chat. This will also be sent out in the email after the webinar within the week. So hopefully that this will be a useful tool as you begin the new school year and looking to incorporate these themes in your respective educational setting. We also have our social and emotional learning list, and this continues to be our most popular reading list. It's all diverse books about SEL themes. There's empathy, perspective taking, recognizing and managing emotions, positive relationships, perseverance, perspective taking, just to name a few. So if you're looking for new ideas for books to incorporate in your classroom, work with your school librarian, check out your public library for these titles that align to these themes. And our collection, the link is at the bottom here, and you can also reach out to me if you're interested in learning more for your school. And our team is more than happy to customize a collection for you. We have built customized SEL collections for schools and districts across the country. Kelly actually being an example for her district. It was great to work with her in her district in Michigan about helping them supplement and complement the books in their library. And then these are some SEL resources that I compiled. And these can also help to inform the framework that you're working with for teaching ideas. If you're looking to incorporate more SEL programming into your school, check out these lists. I also put our Lee and Low Trauma Informed Diverse Reading List, which is separate from our SEL list. We also had a webinar dedicated to the Trauma Informed list several years ago. It's all on our website, which I can share in our chat during the Q&A. So feel free to take a picture of this or check it out when we send it. We also have free teacher's guides for all of our books. For example, I put up images for the electric sliding Kai. All of our resources are free and ready to download. So if you go and type in electric sliding Kai on our search bar on our website, you'll get to see the teacher's guide. We also have a social and emotional learning section in our newest teacher's guides from the past several years. So we decided to incorporate an entire section dedicated to social and emotional learning apart from the interdisciplinary activities because we know how critical SEL is. So now we get to have our question and answer. And I'm really excited about some of these questions that we pulled from you all. Thank you for such thoughtful questions. If you have, I'll ask that at the end. It's a good, Adia, I have a great question for you about the amygdala. Please feel free as we're talking to keep typing in your questions. We'll see if we can get to them because we have quite a few. So first, I'm going to start with Kelly. And someone was asking, I've always been one to lead with empathy because many of our children don't grasp the concept of being in someone else's shoes. My question is, how do I embrace this method across different grade levels that come into my building on a regular basis. Addressing tweens is very different from grade school age and toddlers. So thinking about educators, librarians, people who are dealing with multiple age groups and talking about SEL.
Okay, great question. It kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Traditionally, you would expect children to learn these things in the home, church, community, and you can't always count on that now. And so while we have them for the 7-8 hours, it is our job to do the best we can to embed those skills and put it out there, even if it feels like you're doing that over and over every day, or after every weekend, you're going over the same things. I think once we become okay with that, because that's what it is, and accept that, yeah, I think we'll be a lot better with it. You got to get your mind to that point where I might have to do this every single day, but it's worth it. Who knows when the seed will take root and grow. So in terms of empathy, number one, of course, you're modeling that all the time. And I would say continue to put them in situations where they have to answer that question of how would you feel? Like there's never too many times to put them in that situation. I would use clips from films where you can just, 2-minute clip or whatever, and then have a discussion. Books, obviously, is a good way to look and see how would you feel in this situation. Sharing examples. I would say use any and every avenue. Popular music. We have to get all the way out of the box. They are glued to these. And are getting so much content and information, and we can be against it all we want. That's just where things are. So how can we leverage that and incorporate that in how we're teaching? So you might have everybody pull up a YouTube clip. You might listen to, depending on your age level, listen to popular songs that you know that they're listening to. Find the clean version if you have to. Write lyrics on the board from that song. Can you imagine how a child would feel? Like you took the time to listen to this song, whether you agree with it or not, whether it's what you listen to or not, put lyrics on the board and use that. So this artist said such and such, such and such, such and such. What does that sound like to you? Does it sound like he or she is in pain or has gone through something? Have you gone through something? How would you express what you've gone through? How can you relate to these lyrics? And if you don't, that's just as important, because you start to see other people might go through things that I don't go through. And that's something important for kids at all ages to realize. I've never been homeless, but there are kids out there my same age who have experienced that, and take some time to settle and sit in that. And how do I feel? I feel like that's a missing link, is empathy. Our culture right now lends itself to selfishness so much. And what can I do to entertain myself? And what can I do to please myself? And what do I want? I. And this is all ages, not just the little kids who haven't developed it. And so I would say to consistently place them in situations or lead discussions where the focus is, yes, how would I feel? But if I was in this person's shoes, and really take the time to incorporate that. And then you're extending that grace, you are modeling empathy yourself, but just trying to incorporate it into everything, using a lot of the mediums that have their attention anyway. So that's kind of my take on and my experiences in my school of how I do that.
Thanks so much, Kelly. So, Adia, I want to pose 2 questions and I want to give you the option of answering them. We had someone in the chat say, can the amygdala shrink back? You know how it's been enlarged. Can it shrink back? Or do you want to talk about, someone had a question about hoping to hear about the effects of the pandemic and mask wearing and the loss of seeing facial expressions. So
I can actually do both, because the amygdala question is a very good question. So far in the literature and in our research, we're not seeing the amygdala go back to its normal campus. If you get them out of that traumatic and you surround them with the support that they need, the love and the consistency and the safety they need, then they grow brain tissue in the frontal lobe, grow new brain tissue in the hippocampus, and they can learn coping strategies, they can learn empathy, they can learn perspective taking, they can learn joint attention, and these other things that we talked about. And someone had a question about facial masks and whether wearing facial masks during the pandemic interfered with children's abilities to be able to read facial expressions. I thought that was a great question. And I did a literature search. And I even called one of my mentors in Pakistan to talk to her, because that is a very cultural question, right? So in the United States, Western Europe, we don't traditionally wear face coverings. It's just not a part of our culture. But in many parts of the world, they do. There are certain Muslim nations where some women wear the niqab, which is the facial covering, the veil, the niqab. And other parts of the world, such as in Eastern Asian countries, like in the cities of Vietnam and Japan and China, where there are high levels of pollution, environmental pollution, people wear face masks. And when I went to Saigon a number of years ago, women had the most like glammed up face masks that covered them from their eyes to their collarbone every single day. So in those cultures, kids are looking at facial masks and facial coverings all the time. What the United States literature shows, that's all we've got, is during the pandemic, younger children between the ages of 3 and 5 did have a harder time figuring out people's emotional states unless there was context. So if you had tone of voice, the situations going on, they're able to figure out the person's facial expression, even with the facial cover. But if you only had the face on a piece of paper, that was harder for preschoolers than it was for school-age children and for adults. I only found one study that involved Muslim individuals from the United Arab Emirates and compared them to people from college students who are from Western Europe, showed them faces of people wearing facial coverings, and both groups had a difficult time interpreting facial expressions. I think that's a new area that we really need to explore. I think it's more complicated than yes or no.
Mm.
Somebody also asked a question about what do you do about parents who are worried about SEL being politicized?
Yeah.
Can I hit on that right quick?
Yeah, I wanted you both to talk about it. I think
Yes.
it's a great way to end, to conclude.
Thank you. So I started kindergarten in the 70s, okay? 1976. We had something called citizenship grades. Y'all remember citizenship? So those of us who are Generation Xers like me know what citizenship was. And they graded you on not only how you behaved and followed the rules, but how you treated other classmates and how kind you were and compassionate you were. And did you share your pencils? And did you wait your turn in line? That's what SEL is. So do you want your child to learn to be a good citizen and have compassion and have empathy? Or do you want your child to learn to be the son of Sam? Like, that's just up to, I'm kidding. That's just up to you. And so SEL is not like religious indoctrination. It's teaching kids how to be human and have normal human compassion for other human beings.
I agree. I there's not much more to say on that. And on report cards now, those elements are still there. You're following directions, working independently. Those citizenship things are still on report cards. So it is important. And I say, don't get hung up on the title, because in 15 years, it could be called something completely different. It really could. But the underlying themes, do you want your child to know who he or she is? Do you want them to be confident in what they're good at? Do you want them to be able to get along with others? I think when you frame it that way, it takes some of the mystique or the mystery, or, it's some high and lofty academic term. I think that takes it away when you break it down to say, this is actually what it is, character development. It's what you should, not to come at anybody, but it's what you should be doing in the home. We're supplementing in the school. We should all be a team in trying to create this well-rounded and developed child. That's all it is. That's all it is.
Also, I wanted to add about the pushback for SEL and the politicization. During our Black Lives Matter webinar in 2021, Lelenia Garcia, she's the author of What We Believe, our Black Lives Matter activity book. And this was in regard to Black Lives Matter, but I think it really applies to SEL. It really applies to any hot topic. She encouraged educators if they ever experience pushback, think about it to encourage them to think about the mission. What is the school's mission statement? It probably applies to SEL and the principles of Black Lives Matter as well. She was talking about Black Lives Matter, but they're talking about, the school is embodying SEL within the mission statement, most likely. So you can also remind people that exists, that you're teaching about those principles in your classroom. And I thought that was such a great way to talk about any kind of controversy. Okay, so I think we have a few more minutes. So this is a fun question to conclude with, I think. For Kelly and Adia, do you have any what are some songs that you recommend for kids who are experiencing anxiety? Any kind of songs, videos, something fun to end our session with?
Baby Shark. No, I'm kidding. Because I don't want to encourage adult anxiety with that and the overflow. But the reality is, if that's going to help the student, then yeah, we're baby sharking. If Let It Go, come on, guys. If Let It Go is going to help the student, then that's what we need to play. You'll be amazed at some of these Disney songs that have really caught on, and the meaning and the connection that children. Music is powerful. Music is absolutely powerful. So you use what you can. I would go back to Sesame Street and play some of those songs as well. And Adia, when you share your comments, I'm just going to drop a few resources in the chat that I found that kind of deal with that. But yeah, some kids they need calming music. Other kids might need that upbeat. So you're just kind of building relationship. I hope that you get that from this, even with what Adia was saying, like relationship building is so critical so that you can get to know your student, their triggers, and what they might need at any given moment. If you don't know them, you're going to stand in the doorway when they're trying to get out and they need to get out.
Exactly.
So if you forget everything else we said, build some relationships with your students. That's going to be very meaningful. I'm going to put some stuff in the chat real quick.
I think Kelly actually said it all. I couldn't think of any particular songs, but she's absolutely right. It's using what the children already have. One resource I thought about, however, is Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media is a wonderful tool that evaluates just about any form of media you can think of. They have an entire section dedicated to meditation apps for children, and they rate apps for young children all the way up to adolescents. And that actually might be a resource to find good meditation music or visualizations for children to be able to self-calm when they're overwhelmed. I think this could be a really good school-wide type of intervention.
Okay, great. Yes, thanks for sharing that, Adia, about Common Sense Media. Okay, so that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much, Adia and Kelly. I can't thank you enough for dedicating the time and energy to be with us today. I have learned an immense amount from just spending an hour with you both. Thank you so much. And I hope that this empowers you all to begin a great new school year and to work with your students and to integrate literacy into your SEL and your everyday lives. You can reach out to us if you're looking for back to school, for building anything related to back to school. You can reach out to us for more information. You can email me, kpotter@leonlow.com, if you have any additional questions or you need a certificate. And follow us on social media. Our blog has a lot of articles about SEL. If you type in social and emotional learning, we have books for grades pre-K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8. And we've had many experts over the years write about the importance of SEL and children's literacy. And that's it. Thank you again, Adia and Kelly. Hope you all have a great rest of your day and wonderful start to the school year. Bye, everybody.